minutes ago, Zelenskyy slammed Belarus. Lukashenko is losing his footing. The regime is cracking like spring ice. Kyiv has shown who the new master of Minsk is. This happened live on air. The finale is already close. Public anger is growing, elites are panicking, and the dictator himself is scrambling. Putin is in panic. All cards are on the table. The deployment of training grounds and the transfer of ORESHNIK became the last straw. Ukraine is methodically closing in on Putin. The world got the signal. All of this coming up next. Watch until the end. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Urgent! Volodymyr Zelenskyy is cutting off the oxygen to the Belarusian dictatorship. Lukashenko is gasping for air and his regime appears to be living out his final days. Ukraine delivers a final blow and appoints a special representative for contacts with democratic forces. Is Putin's ally finally being taken down?
We must support the efforts of the democratic forces of Belarus.
Decisive statements from Kyiv are now echoing around the world. The foreign ministry made it clear Batka should start preparing. The wheel of revenge has been set in motion and it can no longer be stopped.
It is truly important for us to maintain relations with representatives of democratic Belarus. We believe the time will come when Belarus, a democratic Belarus, will become the fourth participant in the Lublin Triangle.
Has a new and, the most importantly, legitimate president of Belarus already been chosen? Volodymyr Zelenskyy shook hands. The whole world held its breath. On the arena of political confrontation, Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya. The Ukrainian president met with her in Vilnius. An intriguing moment and a clear signal. Discussions of further plans and an invitation to visit Kyiv. And more than that, behind closed doors, the possibility of opening a criminal case against Lukashenko may have been discussed.
That is why, with the assistance of the Belarusian opposition, Ukraine may begin the procedure of putting Lukashenko on the international wanted list.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy does not hide his attitude toward the self-proclaimed leader of Belarus. Recently, the president of Ukraine publicly and without any pleasantries took aim at Lukashenko live on air. A sharp, emotional statement shook the space and made everyone uneasy.
Поки що білому шпіцу Лукашенка залишено більше прав, ніж народу Білорусі. На жаль. Був шанс у 2020 році, щоб це змінити, і я впевнений, буде ще шанс. Але тоді підтримки для Білорусі було просто недостатньо. А тепер ми усі відчуваємо, наскільки складніше, наскільки дорожче, наскільки небезпечніше стало для усіх через залежність Білорусі від Москви. Залежність, що не стає меншою.
Zelenskyy also publicly emphasized that Putin is using the territory of a neighboring state as a testing ground to blackmail Europe and the world with ORESHNIKs. And not only that.
Росія використовує Білорусь як полігон для шантажу Європи і світу орешниками. Промисловість Білорусі працює на російську війну, а торговельні зв'язки допомагають Путіну купувати компоненти, які потрібні, щоб будувати загрозу проти усіх нас в Європі.
Not long ago, Russia's Ministry of Defense proudly reported that the ORESHNIK missile system had gone on combat duty in Belarus. Supposedly, look, a nuclear monster is being deployed right next to NATO.
The missile system was put on combat duty on time. The personnel are well coordinated, the crews are prepared, combat duty is organized, and everything is in accordance with the guiding documents. We are mastering new areas for combat patrols, conducting reconnaissance of new locations, and holding scheduled training sessions there in line with assigned tasks. Training sessions on combat readiness, tactical training, and tactical special training are held daily and weekly. The personnel have already proven their professionalism in practice during scheduled exercises.
However, American researchers immediately leaked where Lukashenko could have placed this long-awaited weapon. The moment of Belarusian Russian triumph vanished instantly.
Lewis and Eveleth said they were 90% certain that mobile ORESHNIK launchers would be stationed at the former airbase near Krychev, some 190 miles, 307 kilometers east of the Belarus capital of Minsk, and 300 miles, 478 kilometers southwest of Moscow.
And even here, Putin is raking in the heat with someone else's hands. Despite loud statements, the missile system most likely never passed into the hands of the Belarusian military. Russia's Minister of Defense openly stated all infrastructure in Belarus was created for the Russian contingent, both for combat duty and permanent deployment. Military training grounds allegedly being built for Belarus's needs are another revealing aspect of cooperation between the two dictators. Social media exploded with reports. Is Lukashenko preparing to launch a new Putin-style aggression from his territory? A new training ground is rapidly taken shape in the Gomel region.
Satellite images show that the area has already undergone significant changes in the past month. The clearing work is scheduled to be completed by the end of March 2026, with over $350,000 allocated for the project.
At the same time, another alarming storyline is unfolding. A full-scale military town is being built in the region, where a new air assault brigade is planned to be deployed. The training ground will likely become a logical continuation of this military configuration. All of this is happening amid a sudden combat readiness check of the army. Lukashenko abruptly changed plans, rushed into inspections, and decided to personally determine the sites for control. According to preliminary information, the first target was a technical support unit, one of the key and largest in the Belarusian armed forces. This is where armored systems and large stockpiles of military equipment are concentrated. The question remains open: is this real preparation another loud attempt to remind the world of himself, or once again assistance to his friend Putin? It seems Putin is backing down. He can no longer hold not only Belarus but Central Asia as well. Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are sharply changing the game and moving toward tough decisions. China is quietly but confidently taking control over strategic regions. Turkey is skillfully extracting influence and money, leaving Moscow alone with its own chaos. The Kremlin dictator is cornered, and no way out of this trap is visible. How will this end? We'll break it down next.
A long-standing friendship is falling apart at the seams. According to Bloomberg, the Kremlin's longtime allies in Central Asia and the Caucasus are forging ties with China, the European Union, Turkey, and the Gulf countries, seeking to protect themselves from further aggression by Moscow. They are trying to minimize risks and are looking for ways to distance themselves from Russia as much as possible.
Asian countries are reassessing Russia's role in the modern world and their own relationships with Russia.
The lesson that Central Asian countries have drawn from the full-scale invasion is that Russia is committed to its strategic goals, no matter the cost. Kate Mallinson, partner at Prism Strategic Intelligence Limited, in London. Kay.
Another diplomatic failure has been added to Russia's list: the deterioration of relations with Kazakhstan. Even though Putin is loudly proclaiming a great friendship from every possible platform.
For Russia, Kazakhstan is also one of its largest trading partners within the Commonwealth of Independent States and the Eurasian region. Overall,
Kazakhstan has long been demonstrating a cautious yet confident distancing from Moscow. It refuses to support the war against Ukraine, does not recognize the annexation of Ukrainian territories, conducts exercises with NATO, and is developing transport corridors bypassing Russia, including through the Caspian and Turkey. And Tokayev states Kazakhstan's principled position directly to Putin's face.
We do not officially recognize Taiwan, and we also do not recognize Kosovo, nor South Ossetia, nor Abkhazia. And it has become increasingly apparent that this specific principle will also be implemented and enforced regarding the so-called sovereign state territories, which, in our professional view, specifically encompass the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
Against this backdrop, Russia resorted to energy blackmail. Moscow has effectively blocked the export of Kazakh oil. On July 22, 2025, Russia unexpectedly imposed restrictions on the export of Kazakh oil through Novorossiysk. This is the key route for exporting oil from Kazakhstan. The official reason cited was environmental concerns and technical issues. But in reality, this is a political signal. Astana has gone too far in its independent foreign policy. Against this backdrop, the energy blackmail looks like a desperate attempt to regain lost influence. However, the effect is likely to be the opposite. Kazakhstan will accelerate its integration with alternative economic blocs, building closer cooperation with China, Turkey, and the West.
Yes, within the framework of the Eurasian Economic Union, we do have disagreements, because we meet not only in open sessions, but sometimes also behind closed doors.
my colleague said that there are sometimes disagreements, not that we always have disagreements. In the closed sessions, we always argue.
But that's not all. Last year, Russia began demanding that owners of cars assembled in Kazakhstan and imported in 2024 to 2025 pay an additional recycling fee, a fee with increased coefficients. Kazakhstan is preparing tough retaliatory measures against the Russian automotive industry. The authorities of the republic are proposing to sharply increase the recycling fee on cars imported from Russia and Belarus by as much as 40 times. In this way, Astana has taken steps to weaken economic ties with Moscow. Additionally, this week the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, effectively accused Russia of fraud in financial operations. According to him, last year through the Bank of Kazakhstan, Tomahawks, about $14 billion were transferred from a neighboring country to other countries. Tokayev noted that from the standpoint of law, economics, and even politics, this is an outrageous fact. The president of Kazakhstan did not specify which country he was referring to. The Moscow Times writes that in his speech, Tokayev was clearly hinting at the aggressor country, Russia. In addition to Kazakhstan, Russia is losing another ally, as Uzbekistan is also distancing itself from the Kremlin. The Kremlin launched a large-scale campaign against migrants, and Tashkent responded harshly. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan claims that there were human rights violations during the raid by Russian law enforcement agencies. It is demanding an investigation into the deaths of citizens in Moscow on June 25th. Tashkent insists on the protection of the rights of Uzbek citizens working in Russia. This is despite the tightening of Russia's migration laws. As expected, Uzbekistan is pursuing a multi-vector foreign policy, distancing itself from Russia's direct influence in the political sphere.
That is, for a long time, the perception of Russia as the successor to the Soviet Union, a major world power in one way or another influenced, for example, the Asian countries that were previously within Russia's sphere of influence. And even those countries that were not in Russia's orbit of influence still took Russia into account, as a rather significant global player.
Against the backdrop of Russia's rapid withdrawal from the post-Soviet South, other forces are taking its place. First and foremost, Turkey and China. Turkey already de facto dominates in Azerbaijan, is strengthening its influence in Armenia, and is actively working with Kazakhstan.
Probably among the Asian countries, Turkey was the first to challenge Russia. We remember the incident with the downing of the Russian plane. But overall, Turkey has been positioning itself as a player for quite some time now. A global player essentially on par with Russia. They are quite comparable to Russia, and Turkey does not behave as some kind of junior partner to Russia. But lately, we have been observing how Asian countries are no longer seeing Russia as a serious threat.
China, in turn, is deepening its economic and logistical cooperation with Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries. Beijing is seen as a more predictable and economically beneficial partner than Moscow.
Asian countries are now reorienting themselves toward new centers of power. First and foremost, of course, China, but Turkey is also not wasting any time and is increasing its influence in the Turkic world, which actually encompasses not only Central Asia, but also a significant part of the modern world.
After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent severing of Moscow's economic ties with the West, China became Russia's main partner. In recent years, trade between the two countries has been growing at an impressive pace. However, in 2025, this growth suddenly turned into a decline, showing that the no-limits friendship touted by Moscow and Beijing does, in fact, have its boundaries. Deutsche Welle reports that in 2025, the volume of Russian-Chinese trade decreased for the first time in the past 5 years, by as much as 7%, down to approximately $228 billion. The Russian world is being replaced by Turkish drones and Chinese investments. Western diplomatic missions and regional alliances are forming without Russia's participation. In
the case of Asian countries, things are much more complicated than, for example, with European countries. And diplomacy there is built on somewhat different principles. I think that the leaders of many Asian countries will continue to show formal respect to the Russian leadership for quite some time. But at the same time, it is clear that perceptions of Russia itself have changed dramatically. And now no one sees Russia that way anymore, as some kind of ultimate player in Eurasia who will dictate its terms to everyone in the region.
The Russian dictator has to pay with a loss of influence, allies, and reputation. Putin is losing the very geopolitical game that he himself imposed on the world.
Putin's entry into Hungary also appears to be closing. The moment of truth has arrived. Another Kremlin friend can withstand the pressure. Orban is being pushed out, next without dictatorial influence and Putin's insane ideas. Hungarians are ruthlessly trampling Moscow, and it looks like this is only the beginning. Next, the final shot at the dictator in the new course? More on this in just a moment.
Hungary is entering a new electoral cycle that could radically change the country's political landscape. The pro-government, corrupt system is not interested in people's real problems and doesn't even dare to look them in the eye.
The parliamentary elections, scheduled for April 2026 for the first time in more than 15 years, pose a real threat to the power of Orban's Fidesz party. Heavy artillery has been brought into play. The Prime Minister is frightening Hungarians with the prospect of war with Russia if his party loses the elections.
If we have a government supported by Brussels, they will drag us into war. If we have a national government, we still have a chance to avoid it.
To explain the drop in his party's ratings, the Prime Minister of Hungary began looking for someone to blame. To start with, he accused Ukraine of trying to interfere in the upcoming elections and summoned the ambassador to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Our national security agencies have analyzed this latest attack by Ukraine and concluded that these events are part of a coordinated series of measures by Ukraine aimed at interfering in the elections in Hungary. But we cannot allow anyone to jeopardize Hungary's sovereignty or the integrity of Hungarian elections.
The response from the Office of the President and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine was not long in coming.
Putin does not want peace, but wants the war to continue. Therefore, by blocking Ukraine's accession to the EU, Orban is fulfilling Putin's wishes, blocking the restoration of peace in the EU and making Hungary an accomplice of the Kremlin regime.
And the president's communications advisor, Dmytro Litvinov, published a photo of a 100-ruble Russian banknote. Orban is looking for a way to stay in power in Hungary regardless of the election results. He even tried to rewrite the laws, but he didn't succeed.
And with his anti-Ukrainian rhetoric, Orban definitely won't win.
Budapest under Orban's leadership is diverging from Brussels while simultaneously demonstrating political rapprochement with Moscow.
Now, when Russia and the Trump administration share a common goal to keep this government in power, I sincerely hope that the international community will pay attention to exposing any attempts at interference.
Opposition forces in the country are becoming noticeably more active. For the first time in many years, Orban has a rival who is truly capable of competing for power, the leader of the TISA party, Peter Magyar.
The Brussels dead end is TISA. In exchange for a few pats on the back and immunity, they will agree to deals with Brussels and fulfill all their demands. They will say yes to war, to funding Ukraine, to settling migrants, and to gender propaganda.
The people of Hungary understand that the oil and gas bought from Russia are paying for the war in Ukraine.
If Russia really is the aggressor, if Russia is challenging civilization, which is already obvious to everyone, then how can you keep relying on its oil and gas, its resources and economic relations? Well, here, it's not a question of whether you like Russia or not. It's simply a rational approach. If this brings nothing to Hungary, if it only results in losses because economic ties with Europe are being destroyed, energy resources one way or another will be coming less and less from Russia.
Members of the political opposition believe that the country must finally liberate itself from its long-standing strategic reliance upon Putin.
Orban's media machine and his propaganda methods have essentially blinded society to the moral unacceptability of this friendship with Vladimir Putin. In my opinion, he has managed to influence many Hungarians who, under other circumstances, would never have agreed to such political closeness with Russia.
Orban's popularity is often linked to his control over key media outlets. Putin does the same thing in Russia. Propaganda has become deeply entrenched and significant resources are being spent to strengthen it.
Running a campaign in such a restricted environment is much more difficult than in a fully democratic system, where there is open space for discussion and media independence is guaranteed.
Let us recall that Hungary has been under a state of emergency since 2015. At present, it has been extended until the spring. The opposition believes that this is a blatant abuse of power aimed at further restricting the powers of parliament and narrowing democratic rights.
This means that everyone expects that Orban will eventually end his career as prime minister and that someone else, his opponent, currently Peter Magyar, will become the prime minister of Hungary. In any case, even if there is a change of power, it means that it will be much easier for Ukraine and the European Union to negotiate with Hungary and resolve the issues that we need to discuss and settle with them. Or when we need their support, in order for them to back some decision regarding support for Ukraine, funding for Ukraine, or other issues.
Orban says that he is not afraid of losing the next elections and considers his main opponent not to be the opposition leader Peter Magyar, but Brussels. But the fact remains, it is unlikely that Orban will leave quietly if, for the first time in 2 decades, he loses an election.
Putin's relationship with Trump also appears to have finally deteriorated. The United States has decided to clamp down on Russia. The Tomahawk decision is back in the spotlight. In the heat of negotiations, the White House chief is showing strengths. Pleasure is off the charts. Washington switches to turbo mode and is clearly trying to corner the Kremlin. The stakes have skyrocketed, and this game could turn everything upside down. What exactly is being planned in the White House? And does the photo of Trump and Putin in the American president's office signal that the U.S. has chosen a target for elimination? Coming up next.
Tomahawks for the armed forces of Ukraine, a significant new United States strategy, designed to exert more pressure on the Kremlin. Washington is discussing a plan to strike deep inside Russia to force Putin to make peace.
I doubt I can contribute much more to this here.
A small group of Ukraine's supporters in Washington claims that the only way to force the Russian dictator to come to the negotiating table is to significantly strengthen Kyiv's position, and this can be done with Tomahawk missiles.
As last year's experience has shown, only as soon as the United States even mentioned Tomahawk missiles, Putin immediately began to display the highest level of constructiveness, or rather constructive behavior, and tried in every possible way to show that he wanted peace. As soon as Putin realized that Ukraine had no chance of getting any Tomahawk missiles, that was it. After that, the campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure and the terrorism against Ukrainian cities began.
At the center of this initiative is Dan Rice, president of the American University in Kyiv and former special advisor to the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who held a meeting with the U.S. Secretary of Defense, according to Kyiv Post.
Putin only responds to strength. If he does not agree to peace, then in my opinion, there is a high likelihood that President Trump will approve the use of Tomahawks.
Rice refused to disclose the details of the meeting, calling most of the conversation confidential, but did reveal what he had proposed. According to him, he directly asked the Secretary of Defense to provide Ukraine with Tomahawks, even if it was just a small, undisclosed number.
Even if we are given 20, 30 or 50 missiles, it won't make much of a difference. We need 100 missiles per month to have at least some kind of parity with the Russian Federation. And the latest figures, the Russians launch about 300 different missiles at Ukraine every month. So we need to launch no fewer, preferably more, and then we can really put pressure on the Russian Federation.
Ukraine tried to obtain these missiles from the US during Biden's term, but up to now, Tomahawks have still not been supplied to the Ukrainian army.
It is believed, again, we don't know for sure, but rumor has it online, that the United States of America can produce about 100 missiles a year, 100 missiles per year. So for the average person, it might seem like, well, 100, that sounds like a lot. 100 missiles, that's a lot. Let's look at it from another angle. The cost of each missile, according to various estimates, could be $2 million per missile or even $4 million, as for example, when the Americans once sold them to Japan. So for themselves, it's a bit over 2 million, but for the Japanese, it was 4.25 million per missile. So these are large sums. It would seem that if money isn't the issue, then the problem lies in the quantity.
That's why whether Trump will approve the supply of Tomahawks remains an open question. While some officials believe that American missiles could indeed become a lever of influence on Russia during negotiations, others fear that the transfer of Tomahawks could, on the contrary, undermine diplomatic efforts.
If the United States had clearly stated that should Russia destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Ukraine would receive Tomahawk missiles, I guarantee you that nothing like what is happening now would have occurred. But the United States has a different approach. They are trying to persuade Putin in a friendly way, to maintain good relations with him, and everything along those lines. Therefore, to be honest, I don't believe at all that the United States would give Ukraine Tomahawk missiles under Trump.
It is important for us to carefully recall that American Tomahawk cruise missiles are fully capable of storing and maintaining up to 15 pre-programmed targets in memory, and can dynamically alter their intended destination mid-flight, as well as having the capacity for carrying either nuclear or conventional warheads.
What do you think about the latest developments? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and stay up to date with what matters most. More to come.